line, and the Eagles have selected quarterback Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma in the second round. I think a surprise to many as I'm looking on Twitter, and we are here to break it all down for you here on Eagles Draft Central, presented by Dietz and Watson. Fran, initial thoughts on this? Are you surprised?
Well, yeah, it's certainly a surprise, but when you look at Jalen Hurts, he's a really, really fun player to evaluate. And then number two, the character, and I've raved about this kid, everything you hear about him, off the field, and just watching him from afar, you can't help but be impressed with what he's overcome from a football adversity standpoint over the course of his career. Steps on campus right away as a true freshman at Alabama, leads them to the national title game, wins the title, comes back as a sophomore, goes to the title again, gets benched at halftime. 99.9% of college students in this day and age would have transferred after that game. He doesn't transfer. He stays put. He battles it out in camp with Tua Tagovailoa. He loses the competition, still stays in school, is a great backup to Tua, waits his turn, does a great job in that role, and then steps into the SEC title game against Georgia, leads them to victory, vaults them to the playoffs. I look at Jalen Hurts as a guy that you know what you're getting, a guy that certainly has a lot of upside. You look at his athleticism, you look at his tools, and what I always say about guys that have upside, can they reach it? They need that football character. You need those intangibles to reach that upside. Jalen Hurts unquestionably has those intangibles to be able to reach that upside. We're going to talk with Ross Tucker here in a second. Ross just came on my podcast, came on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast earlier this week, and we talked about all those intangibles that you need to be able to succeed at the NFL level. Jalen Hurts, without question, has those.
Yeah, the maturity off the charts, and let's go ahead and bring in Ross Tucker to break this down. And Ross, I think one of the biggest things that stands out to me about Jalen Hurts, who has been one of my absolute favorite college football players, maybe ever, based on what he has been through. This is a guy who is tried and true, who has overcome so much adversity. As Fran kind of took us through that story, for him to continue to show up and put his team first, and then to see him lose that starting job to Tua, still remain a big part of this Alabama team, go on to Oklahoma, and then become a Heisman finalist there, continue to have his own story and his own success elsewhere. And just the way he handled all of that, I think you have to be impressed with this young quarterback prospect.
Yeah, listen, he's an unbelievable kid. I was on the sideline at the 2018 SEC championship game, Alabama, Georgia. Tua gets hurt. Jalen Hurts comes in that game and saves the day for the Alabama Crimson Tide, really saves their season and will forever be a legend in Alabama history because of that. I also saw him live last year against Houston, and once he got into that Oklahoma offense a year ago, he showed that he can do a lot more throwing the football than he had done at Alabama. There's a reason why he was the offensive player of the year at Oklahoma, and there's a reason why he's being drafted in the second round. Now, I'm as surprised as anyone that the Eagles are taking him here in the second round. But the one thing that we know about the Eagles, and they've been consistent with this over the last 10, 15, 20 years, they are always going to make sure they have options at the quarterback position. You can see the athleticism he has as well. I wouldn't be shocked if they used him at times in short yardage as almost like a Taysom Hill role for the New Orleans Saints as a short yardage runner of the football from the quarterback position. He is that athletic. But the bigger picture here is the Eagles want to make sure they always have options and they're always covered at the quarterback position.
Ross, it's so funny that you just mentioned Taysom Hill because I was thinking the exact same thing. And of course, Fran, let's talk about how he fits into this Eagles offense. The Eagles have been so clear that Carson Wentz is the quarterback of the future, but they always, as Ross mentioned, they always want to be taking a quarterback and developing talent there and always challenging the roster and creating some competition. How do you see him fitting into the Eagles quarterback room?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly going to come in and play a part in that competition, right? I mean, as a second-round pick, as a rookie, you're not going to be on the practice squad. So he's going to be on this active roster this year. And my guess is if he's on the active roster, they're going to find ways to be able to get him involved. Will it just be a pure redshirt year and say, okay, you're going to come in, learn the system, work behind Nate Sudfeld? That certainly is on the table. We know that Nate Sudfeld can be a competent backup quarterback for this Eagles football team. But I think when you look at Jalen Hurts, again, what he brings to the table from an athleticism standpoint, there have been times over his college career where they handed him the football on jet sweeps, and he was able to do some of those things. Certainly in that Oklahoma offense this year, all the run-pass option things that they did, not just that, but the pass-run option that they ran with him under center, or in the shotgun, I should say, out in Oklahoma, with what they were able to do with him, with his legs, and utilize him. I believe he was a 1,000-yard rusher in that offense this year, so he certainly brings that element to the table. But one of the things that really stands out to me, too, about Jalen is, look, every year, he's gotten a little bit better as a passer, and every time, honestly, I've seen him now twice throw live. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and then I saw him at the Combine. He got markedly better from the Senior Bowl to the Combine. I thought he looked outstanding throwing the football out in Indianapolis. We talked about that on the Journey to the Draft podcast, just how impressive he looked throwing the football. So, again, you're talking about a guy with athletic traits, arm talent. He's been a winner wherever he's been, okay? He's won a ton of games both at Oklahoma and at Alabama. High characters there. There's a lot to like about Jalen Hurts for sure. Now it's about, okay, what can he be for this offense? He could be a backup quarterback. Can he do some other things? It's going to be a lot of fun to see how he's used ultimately in the grand scheme of things.
Well, and his new Eagles teammates are wasting no time taking to social media to welcome Jalen Hurts to Philadelphia. We have Lane Johnson, Norman to Philly. We know Lane's excited. The Oklahoma connection here. He said, let's run it back. Boomer, fly, Eagles, fly. Those two, I'm sure, will have no trouble connecting as soon as they get here. And another one of his new teammates, Jalen Reagor, who is so excited. Jalen, look at that. I love that. Let's go, bro. Again, two guys also from Texas. I know these guys knew each other at the high school level as well when they were competing at that level as well. Let's continue to break down the game of Jalen Hurts. And Franny started talking about that improvement and the development. Ross, I'm curious, as you watched his college journey, look, he played in this Alabama offense and then an Oklahoma offense, had a lot of success in both places. How have you seen his game develop from the time he stepped on the field as a college freshman to the time to where he is now?
Well, he transferred for a reason, and it paid off for him big time. Because obviously, if he stayed at Alabama, he wasn't even going to play. But even in Alabama's offense, the way they looked at him early in his career, he wasn't going to be a very high pick. Going to Oklahoma, being with Lincoln Riley in that offense, the same offense that the last two number one overall picks, Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, came out of, he showed that he can throw the ball much better than anybody knew he could. I mean, he was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, and he ran a little bit, but it was more with his arm. Why do you think CeeDee Lamb got all those yards? It was Jalen Hurts throwing him the football. And the major point here, Amy, in my mind, is think about how many games the Eagles have won over the years with backup quarterbacks. Important games. I mean, Coy Detmer, A.J. Feely, Kevin Cobb, Michael Vick when he came off the bench, Jeff Garcia, playoff games. Obviously, Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl. And I think organizationally, the Eagles know how important that position is. And I think there's a great opportunity for Jalen Hurts to be the long-term backup here in Philadelphia. By the way, significantly cheaper than what a lot of these backup quarterbacks go for these years. Think about how much money they paid Chase Daniel to be a backup, how much money they paid Nick Foles to be a backup. As a second-round pick, Jalen Hurts costs a lot less than that, but still gives them a very competent backup who, if he has to go in, we know Carson Wentz's injury history, can go in and be very effective, play well, help this team win games, and not have the season be over, not have the season veer down the wrong way if Carson Wentz gets hurt somehow. So that's, I think, why they got Jalen Hurts, long-term backup, and if Carson Wentz gets hurt, he will be able to go in and help this team continue to win football games.
I'm looking at Hurts's college stats here, and in his 2019 season, passed for 3,851 yards, 32 passing touchdowns. And then on the ground, Fran, you mentioned it, 1,298 yards, just shy of 1,300 yards rushing, 20 touchdowns. So really impressive there as a dual threat option. Let's talk again about just the creativity of Doug Peterson as a play caller. And now you look at all these offensive weapons, Fran, that they have with Rager coming in, with Miles Sanders from last year, with Boston Scott, with these tight ends, these receivers, Carson Wentz, and now you add Jalen Hurts to the mix of toys that Doug Peterson has to play with. How high is the ceiling for a guy this creative?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's going to be a factor, but I don't want to necessarily just throw him into that bunch and say, oh, yeah, that's all he's going to be. To Ross's point, I do think he's got the ability to turn into a nice backup quarterback, a long-term backup quarterback for this franchise. And not to mention this, too. Being a backup quarterback, that's a skill set. That is not just, oh yeah, just get anybody that can be your backup quarterback. So to have that guy come in as the starter, as a freshman, and then be reverted back into that backup role and execute that role at such a high level, I think that speaks to his, his ability to progress into that role. So I like that. Number two, the other big thing, and this is a story that I remember from the Senior Bowl, when I go down to Mobile, when I go to Indianapolis, when I go to the Combine, I love talking with these prospects about their teammates. I love talking to them about their opponents. And one of the things I did down in Mobile, I caught up with Neville Gallimore, an Oklahoma defensive tackle. And one of the things I asked him about was Jalen Hurts. Hey, what was it like when he first got to campus? What is he like? What does he like to be around? He said, look, when he first got there, and you would think, Jalen Hurts, he comes in, with all the accolades that he had coming from Alabama, that he's coming in and he's worried about Heisman Trophy and this and that. He said he never once, in a meeting, off to the side in practice, never once did Jalen Hurts, when he was in Norman, talk about an individual accolade. Everything was geared towards winning a national championship for the Sooners. Not about the Big 12. It was about winning a national championship. So for a guy to show up on campus in the middle of the offseason and kind of take everybody under his wing, everybody was impressed with him off the field when he got to Oklahoma. I think when that, again, kind of speaks to his character and what you're getting in a kid in Jalen Hurts.
Absolutely. All right, that will do it for our analysis for right now. The Eagles with the 53rd pick, Jalen Hurts, quarterback out of Oklahoma. Now in the first two rounds, Jalen Rager, Jalen Hurts, two Jalens who grew up in Texas playing football. We will be back with more Eagles Draft Central as soon as the next pick in the third round or wherever it is. As soon as it happens, join us right back here for instant analysis. We'll see you later.